Welcome to Let's Write, the podcast where we'll be taking a dream TV series and turning that into a script this month. If you aren't caught up with our series so far, this is a continuation of last week's episode where we're decided to jump into the NaNoWriMo spirit by trying to spearhead a project based around a proposed idea for a Firefly season 2. So that episode, we kind of just riffed around, talked about Firefly season 1, what we liked, what we thought might make some interesting ideas for a future season. This episode is going to be a more typical Let's Write episode in that we're hopefully going to try to crack some ideas for what the first episode of that season could actually look like.
Yeah.
So I guess before we jump into things, Alicia, you just had a chance to revisit Serenity last night, which is the last on-screen depiction of the Firefly universe. Canonically, I guess, timeline-wise. Do you want to give us a quick recap just to get us all up to speed on where we left our intrepid heroes?
Yeah, so it was the first time I had watched it since it was out in theaters, and I had honestly forgotten a lot of what happened. So it kind of leaves our characters in some really interesting, positions. So, for starters, like Shepard is gone, Wash is gone, Simon was badly injured, but he's fine now. So at the end of Serenity, or well, I guess the through line of Serenity is that River gets captured by kind of the Alliance, and they're doing all sorts of experiments on her, Winter Soldier style. And Simon infiltrates them and breaks her out, and then they take refuge back on Serenity. And so it causes tension with the ship, because then they realize that River is a lot more dangerous than we realized, even in the show. Like, she had flashes of being something more, but Serenity, the movie, really kind of showcased that she is a killing machine when she wants to be. And so on one side, they're being chased by the Alliance. On the other side, to get to where they need to go, to this place, this planet called Miranda that River keeps remembering, to figure out like what's going on with her, they have to cross this empty space and basically run into Reavers, which are these bloodthirsty like cannibals, and they're almost like the boogeymen of space. Like, not even they mentioned in the movie that not even everybody believes they exist, because they're so vicious that nobody really survives them. So they're all kind of like myth and rumor. So on one side, they're being chased by the Alliance, and especially actually an assassin that's being sent to retrieve River and kill anything that gets in his way, played by a very early career Chiwetel Ejiofor.
The operative.
The operative, yes. And then on the other hand, you have these, bloodthirsty kind of Reavers. And so they get to this planet, and it's this old abandoned facility, and they find an old like holodeck, like hologram message. And it's one of the scientists and doctors there that basically explains that it was all the Alliance's fault. The Alliance was working on ways to create this chemical, and that they would release into the air supply that basically would make, kind of unruly, like the outposts, the kind of wilder people out there, just calm them down, subdue them, make them less likely to fight. But it had the opposite problems, that it basically turned them into the zombies, so they all just kind of died. But then a small portion of the population, it had the opposite effect and made them super aggressive and basically turned them into kind of like living, mindless, like zombie killing machines. And that was the Alliance's great secret, was that they are the ones that created the Reavers. That was the secret that Mal and his crew had to get out. So at the end of Serenity, a lot has changed. Mal and his crew, they've released this message into the world. So the world now knows that it was the Alliance that made the Reavers. So the Alliance is, probably going to be in tatters. Wash is gone. He was killed. Shepard Book is gone. He was killed. Then you have Kaylee and Simon there together now. So, so it's Inara and Mal, they're
Doing what they do.
Yeah, will they, won't they, maybe not. So as far as the characters, they've all gone through quite a profound change, but the bigger change is how this will affect the world as a whole, like the larger universe, or if it won't. at all. Like maybe the Alliance finds a way to, somehow brush this under the rug or put a spin on it.
So I think that's a good place to pick up and start to talk about. I know in our initial episode we talked about what does it look like for the characters 10 years later if we're picking up, or 15 or whatever it was.
Sure. And that's a good reminder, just kind of as a quick recap of last episode, the ground rules we sort of set for this season is that we're going to set it kind of relatively in real time, so 10 to 15 years after the events of Serenity. And I guess good time to point out that we're envisioning this right now as sort of a streaming platform or premium cable kind of show. So, hour-long episode, no commercial breaks, something of that nature. Aside from that, though, I think we left ourselves. I guess one more thing. We are aware that there are quite a few comic books that have been produced in the gap between Serenity and now. A couple of them that have continued the story in some way or another. I think we might revisit those for inspiration, but we're not looking at those as sort of a direct canon. This will be more of a sequel to Serenity rather than a sequel to the larger Firefly canon.
Yeah, I think Alicia used the word revival, which I thought was it's kind of a, it's less a season 2. It's more a, limited series revival, I feel like is kind of what we're aiming for. But yeah, so I think in the week or so that it's been since we did our last one, I was telling you guys I had a call with my friend who's a diehard. He's actually the one who introduced me to Firefly. Shout out to Will. I told him I'd shout him out on the podcast.
Wow.
To all of our
What's
3
up,
listeners. But we had an hour-long conversation, and I was just like, look, here's some things that we talked about initially. What do you think? And we just kind of went from there. And so I thought I'd drop in some of the nuggets that we had kind of brainstormed, and then just see how you guys feel about them. So I think to me, when I'm thinking about this revival series, there's kind of 2 levels. There's the level that's the backdrop, the canvas of the galaxy at large, what's going on or what's happened in the galaxy in the past 10 years, so that our characters can have a story that takes place in that canvas, and then what's happening on their level, more at a micro level, less high level. So in terms of the backdrop, the couple things we discussed is that, if this is 10 years, 15 years later, we discussed the idea that perhaps with the information being disseminated in the galaxy, the brown coat cause has had a resurgence. The various people like Mal and such that kind of went into hiding or went into those backwater worlds. They are now we can rally a lot of support to this cause. So in the 10 years since, they've rallied support, and they're actively kind of, I wouldn't necessarily call it a second civil war, although we could go there, but it's no, we have a very good concrete reason now to rally most of the systems.
Brown wave.
Against you. So there was that thought. The other thought, which we thought was really, really cool, was that in light of the whole reveal of what they were doing on Miranda, and then also learning more about what they were doing to River, the one thing that my buddy mentioned that I thought was super, super cool was this idea that perhaps there was, and it ties into what Ryan said last time, which you'd really like to meet someone else from River's class or her group. So we had this idea that the Alliance was keeping this deeper, darker secret, which was someone of River's ilk, but that they were also applying the genetic modification engineering of chemical engineering of Miranda to, and this person would be sort of like a pseudo River, pseudo Reaver. And basically he would have, in this 10-year conflict, in the chaos that the Alliance is undergoing by being besieged by the galaxy, would have escaped his custody and would have found his way to dark space, to the Reavers, and he's the only one that possesses an intelligence. And not that he's a hive mind, but kind of that idea that he's the only one able to give focus to the Reavers that before were just this mindless kind of, almost animalistic tribal group. Now they have a leader, and these whispers start to spread throughout the outer parts of the galaxy. And so you have this renewed Reaver threat that's even they were hard enough to deal with when they had no strategy. Now they have a leader, mysterious figure who's guiding them. And so we thought that was kind of cool, and a potential, really cool climactic end of season thing for River to confront this person who she might recognize from her sessions, but also kind of give the Reavers a one up in this sense. And so those were sort of the things we were talking about from a wide standpoint. From a character standpoint, I think I mentioned to my friend that you had said you would really love to see Zoe and Wash have a child, which I love. I love that idea. And so we kind of developed this kid character that I became really attached to. So if you guys cut him out of the script, I'll be really upset. I'm just kidding.
He's dead.
But
Sorry, he
Scene
died.
one.
Reaver food. Yeah.
So so I had this idea that Wash's name is Hoban Washburn, right? And so that their child would be Hoban Washburn the second, but everyone, instead of calling him Wash, would call him Hobie. And it would just kind of be this like term of endearment. And so like the idea that he grows up just in love with the ship and Uncle Mal, and Mal like treats him completely as an adult. Like he doesn't baby him at all. He's just 100% like
I could understand. I could absolutely 100% see Mal having zero understanding of how to deal with a child.
Yeah, he just completely treats him as, and Hobie likes that. And he's very much grew up like more adult minded. And Zoe I imagine would be conflicted about, I don't want to baby my child either, but I also don't want him to be in situations that resulted in his father dying. So we thought that was a really interesting thread to play with, and there could be this really cool. I was kind of thinking in terms of beats perhaps later in a season, but this idea that when Kaylee eventually ends up back on the ship, that his passion not necessarily was flying, but was the mechanical part of it. So that when Kaylee came back, they could have this kinship where he could work with her in the engine room and just be really passionate about the ship, but from a different angle than his father. There could also be the element that he is actually really good at flying as well, and he inherited that love from his dad, but the whole season stays away from it and doesn't tell anyone. And then there could be a moment later in the series where like they're in trouble and he has to take the reins and does this ridiculous maneuver, and they're all afterwards like, how the hell did you, why didn't you know how to do that? And then he's like, why? It's kind of this emotional moment where he's like, I just didn't like, I don't want to replace him. Like, you guys love him so much. I don't want to, I can't live up to his, and it's like that kind of emotional thing that we could dig up. So that's,
I just got an idea.
okay, go.
I like that. Or he could be kind of a prodigy, like one of those very like kind of precocious children sort of, and not in that like weird like almost robotic precocious way, but I could see if Kaylee and Simon River come back to the ship, him bonding with Simon, because Simon's like, yeah, people think I'm a little bit weird too, or like sometimes it's hard for me to
that's
relate.
really good.
And then Kaylee sees this and is like, you'd make a great dad.
Ooh.
Hint, hint. And then Simon freaks out because his sense of order, and he's like, I'm not ready to be a dad, and I wouldn't be able to protect them, and blah, 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 blah. So that could create a storyline for them
I
as
like that a
well,
lot.
where like, I don't know. That was just a thing popped in my head.
No, I love that. I think
Ryan's giving us dubious looks right now.
No, I think that's interesting. I'm trying to remember what their relative ages were in that show, because I remember them being young, but it's been 15 years, so I'm trying to figure out like if that is reasonable.
I would say like
for them.
early to mid 20s.
Were they in the show early to mid 20s?
I would imagine that. I think like Mal's probably a little bit older. Like,
yeah, but I feel like
think Simon
Kaylee and Simon, like Simon
Yeah,
always
they were
struck
really
me as
young.
being, because he was supposed to be that like medical prodigy. So he quit like med school basically. So he would have been like early 20s. So River was what, 17?
Yeah.
So that would have made Ryan or Simon like, I would imagine like early 20s. And Kaylee, I would imagine to be about that same too. And also you figure like we're in the future. So,
Fair.
Yeah, I think
you could probably have a pod baby or something. I don't know.
but I think
Or
you
could
could
they be
still
them adopting or, something like that?
you could still thread that line of like the Kaylee Simon kind of child. You could still thread that, I think, 10, 15 years later without it necessarily having to be like, now I've just thought maybe you'd be a good father. Maybe it's like a conversation they've been having for many years, and the time is never, like, and then this could be a catalyst to say like, look, you're so good with this. Like, this is concrete proof of what I've been saying for years, that you're great at, you'd be a great father.
Maybe we start here, because we've kind of already starting to do it, going down through the list of like who's like the list of characters and being like, where do we see them at now? Like,
Oh, sorry. Before we do that, one last thing that I think I mentioned to one or both of you that I thought would be a really good inciting incident of the pilot
Yeah.
is the idea that we catch up with all of them having gone their separate ways, because I think we talked about this. I don't foresee any way that they're all still together on the same boat. So the inciting incident would be catching up with each member one by one and what they're doing, and then all of them being like, oh shoot, like just got the notification, I gotta go, I gotta be late, and we find out that they're all supposed to be headed to Mal and Inara's wedding. And then I think you were the one that mentioned, what if the wedding was a ruse, and they all get there and it's an enemy from their past who has used this ruse to bring them all together again as a way to get revenge. And my friend said, there's a couple characters that you could pull from there that they left alive in the series, like Mal's wife, who's very like vengeful. So there's a
She's
couple.
great, yeah.
You could either,
Jubal Early.
Yeah.
Is that his name? Jubal Early?
Jubal
Yeah.
Ely, yeah,
Early,
Ely
okay.
or Early, yeah,
Ely?
he was great.
So you could either we could either make someone
The
up, or we
operative
could
shows
just
up again just because.
yeah. So I think we have two threads. If we're going with this path, we have two threads. One is the kind of direct conflict, which is just them back together trying to solve this immediate issue of whoever's trying to take revenge on them over the course of a 8-episode run or 10-episode run, and then this wider galactic thing that they get involved in, this 3-way battle between Reavers, Alliance, and Browncoats, who they may or may not be associated with. So sorry, that was just the last thing I wanted to put in, is like inciting incident. And then now we can go, I think, character by character. Where are they when we catch up with them?
I think if we start from the top with Mal, I think what could be interesting for him, because this has always been his conflict, is he a scoundrel or is he a hero? Because, rewatching Serenity, I was like, oh, damn, like I forgot, like he's a dick sometimes. Like he makes some decisions. You're just like, ooh, that is like he's very much we see in movies a lot that heroes will always do the right thing, what's right. We more rarely see heroes that are still heroic, but they're the ones who will make the cutthroat decisions that they need to make. Like in the movie where like they're robbing the vault, and then the Reavers come, and then that kid is chasing after him, like screaming like, take me with you, and Mal physically pushes him off the mule, off their ship, because it'll only hold 4 at a time, and if he doesn't kick that kid off and leave him there to die, they all die. And there was that great scene between him and Zoe was like, we just like we wouldn't. She's like, you left that kid to die. And he's like, what would you have me do? He's like, if I didn't do it, we all would be dead. She's like, no, I know. She's like, you had to do that, make that decision for a reason. But you can tell that she's kind of implying that it's not Malcolm's nature to make decisions like that. Cause like he has a much softer heart than you realize, but that's always been his internal conflict. Is he a hero or is he a bad guy? And I can see like if we have that, 3-way kind of battle, like you have the Browncoats kind of reassembling themselves underground, you have the Alliance is trying to keep itself together, because also remember a lot of the Alliance was decimated in the space battle between the Reavers, and then you have maybe the Reavers, maybe they're trying to pull Mal back into it, the Browncoats like, we need a leader, you're legendary, blah 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 blah, and he's like, no, I just want to sit this out, I don't want to take sides, I've done my fighting, I've done my fair part. And so that's his conflict, is he's like, I just want to be left alone. I'm already like made a target enough of myself in the Alliance. I'm trying to stay away from them. I don't need to make myself a bigger target by leading the Browncoats again.
Here's the thought. Since you mentioned that, like this, his nature of perhaps being a dick sometimes, is this too like, so what I'm looking for, like, is this too like sappy if the reason that they're all not together anymore is that at some point in the 10 year, like later in the tenure of that time period, he realized that they all would have just stayed on that ship with him forever, and he's like, I can't, you have to go live lives now, like we're done with this. And so what if he like did something that he was like purposely a massive dick, because that would be well within his nature, but his true motivation was just to like get people to leave so that they would leave the ship, go do their life. And then there could be this like really, really big emotional moment later in the series where, and you kind of like hinted that throughout the pilot, but then later in the series, people are like, well, why you finally find out, maybe you have a flashback episode or something where it's like, well, you were such an asshole to us. Why did you do that? And he's like, because you would have stayed on this boat forever if I hadn't kicked you off of it, and you needed to go live your own lives. And they have this moment where they're all like, oh shit. Like is that too like, is that too stupid?
It's interesting. I think it would work for some of them, but not for all of them. Like there is that line in Serenity where Kaylee's mad because when Simon punches him, they get in the fight, and Simon's like, we're leaving. And Kaylee says to Jane later, and she's like, you don't expect us all to stay here. She's like, eventually Mal will push all of us away, or he'll push all of us out, or he'll kick all of us out, or whatever. Like basically saying like he will eventually drive all of us away.
But then I guess that would ruin their reasoning for wanting to come back for a wedding,
Well, so I think that some of them, I think that would be a good emotional moment. I'm not sure it works in the sense that like, I don't really think Simon would be particularly like beholden to staying on the ship. Like I can see him and Kaylee like being like, we need to make a life for ourselves, and River's coming with us. And I can see like, I could see Zoe staying there because like what else? I could see her maybe going off for a while to like grieve and like
Yeah.
find herself and then come back to the ship.
That's fair.
Jane, who knows what Jane will do, you know, but I can see him and Mal getting into it, and Jane leaves because he's mad. But I feel like the rest of them, it doesn't fully fit with maybe their nature.
You look like you had a thought.
No, I'm more kind of figuring out what Mal is doing at this point, because we are 15 years later. And I think there's I remember when The Force Awakens came out, the Star Wars Episode 7, and we catch up with Han Solo, and he's like still a smuggler. He's a smuggler again, and I think it was a very intentional choice to kind of cut that character a little bit lower. It's supposed to be sort of pathetic and a little bit sad that he's this 50-year-old man, and he's gone back to being a smuggler again. And so I'm thinking like what that means if Mal is still Mal from 15 years ago. Like how long can you do that life? He's like a petty criminal. He's not even that great at it. I think he fucks up more jobs than he does right. If he's still that 15 years later, I think it kind of means something, and it's almost a little bit sad to see. I don't know if that's, at least to me, like that interesting a path for the character to take. It seems like the path of least resistance, and especially if we build it up as like he's still fun and he's heroic and he's Mal. Like I think it's a little bit unauthentic to some degree.
So let me ask you, because so personally, I was thinking of this exact same thing when we catch up with Han Solo. I didn't love that. So is your opinion that like you think going that same angle with Mal would be not a great choice for is that kind of what you're saying?
I think it's a very intentional choice.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to feel sad to some extent. Like, oh man, this dude is kind of pathetic. Like he was a hero and now he's just this again, like he never evolved as a character. And if we're going to make that choice, it says something about the character that I think we have to follow through with.
I feel like that maybe undermines a lot of the growth that he had during Serenity.
I agree.
Because he has that great speech about like where you're just like the whole movie you're like, damn, like Mal, are you good or are you bad? Like what are you? Like are you in or are you out? Are you a hero or are you a villain? Like how are you going to reconcile these two things? Like come on, Mal, like do the right thing, like I know you will. Because so much of the movie he spent just being a complete asshole to everybody. And there's that speech where he's basically like, he finally finds what he believes in. Shepard leaves him and says, like, I don't care what you believe in, just believe in something. And his belief is like, we have to take the Alliance down. Like, we have to get this information that we have. Like, the world, the universe needs to know about this. And so it's that heroic moment where he's basically like, I don't care, what happens to me, but like, you guys are all free to leave. And then Jane was like, a wise man once told me, if you can't do something, or if you can't do something smart, do something good, or do something right. Or if you can't do what's smart, do what's right. That's what it was. And I feel like him just being a smuggler, having like not grown, not learned anything.
I agree.
It's also 13, 15 years. At the very end, the operative tells him like the Alliance will be chasing you. Like they will, like they're in tatters now, but they're not gone and they will not forget this. So is he still a wanted man? Has he maybe settled like on the far outskirts somewhere and tried to like hide? Like has he settled down because he's just tired of running? Like what has happened here to him?
What about the idea that he's so the Alliance would be hunting him, so naturally he'd be on the run. Eventually they would all disband. He would be left with his ship. Like somehow the ship has to still be involved, so he has to have done something with the ship. I'm wondering, what if he's like kind of joined humanitarian efforts? Like, what if if the brown coat movement was in resurgence, they would have undoubtedly reached out to him. He most likely would have been like, I'm out of this. Like, this is not what I'm passionate about anymore. And perhaps he's just helping. Maybe he's just using Serenity to like help aid in, it was the first episode, like the train job. You remember that episode it's like they realize like the cargo is medical supplies. Like, what if he's doing something like that? Like, he's just like, look, I'm just a simple life. Like I joined like the equivalent of like Red Cross or whatever, or, one of these organizations. And he's just like on outskirt planets, just helping people. And it's not, he's not doing it for glory. He's living in a simple, it's a ship. He's just living in a ship, but going back and forth, helping transport anybody who needs like basically a cargo ship, And then it's like, then I feel like that's a little bit more middle ground where we're not saying, we're not saying, oh, he's just a sad smuggler still, but we're also not saying like, oh, he went off and became this heroic rich war hero. And I think it might just be like that simple middle ground where it's in line with what he would do. And like he's just not interested in the politicking of the galaxy anymore until he has to be.
Here's something interesting as well. I am kind of tired, and this is probably just gonna be totally a personally me thing. So if you guys don't agree with us, like, feel free to shoot it down, because I'm sure there'll be listeners out there who would hate this idea.
I disagree strongly before you've even said it.
I kind of hate the whole trope that we keep seeing in, especially in like space movies for some reason. Like, dudes are so attached to their ships. Like, it's our home, it's our home, it's our home. Yes, but people like upgrade their homes. People move out of their homes, and it's sad. But you move when you've evolved. You need to grow. You grow into something more. The Serenity, it's falling apart. Like, it's the running, like on the very last scene of Serenity is they're flying in river and something falls off the ship, and he's like, "What was that?" Like, it's like the Serenity is like kind of falling apart, and yeah, it would be sad to let it go, but at some point you'd think that like maybe he'd be on a different ship. And I feel like that's also growth too. Like, it's always weird to me when like these characters, and it's always these like smuggler kind of types, like they are always so insanely like obsessed with their ship that it's like they never grow past that ship. It's always like about the ship. I need to get my ship back. And it's like, I get that, but like, it's just a ship. Like, it was your home, but people can move on. Like, sure. And I always feel like that's a weird thing that like keeps them from evolving. Like, I don't know, like maybe it's just me, but I would like to see them not on the Serenity. I'd like to see them maybe on a different ship. And maybe that's a line too, where it's all a little bit weird for them because, stuff's in a different place or but maybe it's good because you don't have the ghost. Like, Zoe doesn't have the ghost of Wash being, impaled through the chest, in the cockpit or, things like that. So
that's really interesting because that's true. That would be a pretty traumatic.
Like, maybe this is something where like Mal has decided like he's gotten rid of Serenity and he's gotten a new ship, maybe not upgraded, but he's gotten a different ship because Serenity was that chapter in his life and he wants to be different now, or they've all grown now, or
that's interesting.
Maybe once they do scatter, some of them leave, it doesn't feel like home anymore, so he wants something different.
I think it's an interesting track. I would say that I think there's a middle ground there in the sense that I think textually what we've seen before doesn't support that Mal would just be like, yeah, I'm done with the Firefly, because as you point out, it is a trope, but that is a running, not even a theme, like the core of the show, how attached he is to that vessel and what that means beyond just being a ship. I think we can absolutely work in the idea that everyone, including Mal, has left the Serenity behind, but to have the crux of that happen off screen, I think feels like a bit of a betrayal to the characters we've seen, what we've seen so far, as well as the fans. I think it's absolutely a possibility for a plot point, but I think it should be worked into the core of the show, like the reasons why they left the Firefly and maybe the return, or the Serenity and the return of maybe that ship later in the season could be a moment. I just don't think it should happen off screen and then we never see the Serenity again.
Maybe it's something where he and Inara don't get together, and that's a scene where Inara is like, this is why, Mal, she's like, you never grow. She's like, everybody else has grown and tried to like evolve, or she's like, but that, I guess that undermines what we were saying about like we want him to have grown.
He has to. I mean,
it's possible to have grown without necessarily like leaving everything of himself behind, right? Or alternatively, honestly, like if we're going in this direction, there is definitely the possibility that he's grown so far that he is kind of unrecognizable when we catch up with him, and then we kind of rediscover that Mal, over the course of the season. I think there's definitely a possibility over, what happened in Serenity, the death of the people that were close to him, being hunted by the Alliance. I think it'd be very interesting to play with the idea of a Mal 15 years later who has stopped flying, which is the core piece of his personality. Like, as long as I'm flying, something is going right. think there's a really interesting possibility in there where Mal has just stopped. He's found a planet and he's living on it, and maybe he still has the Firefly, or the Serenity, but it's mothballed. It's in a garage somewhere, and they're not using it. And the return of that ship in the pilot episode of the show could be kind of an instigator for him to take the skies again, for that crew to come back together.
That would be interesting, because I feel like that could tie into. I feel like one of the through lines for a lot of the characters in the original series and through Serenity, the movie, was they don't really, not all of them, they don't really know themselves or know fully who they are. Like Mal, his whole thing was like, again, like Book was like, you need to believe in something, or like, and there were a couple times in the movie where Mal's like, I'll shoot you or whatever. And they're like, no, he won't. Like, he's like trying to be this badass, and he is, but he's trying to be the type of badass he thinks he needs to be. And they're all like, you're not that person. You have Anara, who she doesn't really know what she wants. Like at the very end, when Mal's like, I'll drop you back off in civilization, she's like, I don't know if I want that. And you have, Simon, who basically turns to Kaylee when they're, getting faced down by the Reavers, and is like, holy crap, I just realized I've literally been sacrificing my entire life and everything I want for River's sake. And like, I have never lived my own life for myself. And and then Jane is just too much of an idiot to have any sort of self-reflection and introspection, I think. But I think out of all of them, like, Wash and Zoe were probably Book, but like two of the people that knew themselves best are gone now. And the other one that probably does is Zoe. Like, Zoe's very intuitive with other people and herself. Like, there's that exchange at the end where they're talking about the ship, but they're really talking about Zoe, where Mal's like, do you think she'll fly again? And she's like, she's beat up in holes, or she has holes and some tears, like, but she'll fly true. And she's talking about herself, like, but the rest of them don't really know themselves. And so I feel like that's an interesting line, is like, have they grown? Have they figured out who they are? Because they could be very different by the time we meet them again, because maybe they finally settle into who they want to be.
So I hate to get this like ticky-tacky detailed about it.
Do it.
But I think, and this might cause the
coward.
podcast to be like twice as long, but I don't think we can actually like do that. I don't think we can actually write their story from, and I think it's 14 years later, if we're being specific. I don't think we can do it unless we like track. I don't know if it has to be year by year, but we kind of have to start with like right after Serenity, and we have to walk through what's organic for the characters to get to like, to figure out what point they're at. I don't think you can just say like, he's off on a farm planet somewhere or whatever without having tracked that back, because I think it'll bite you in the ass. If it's just like, it just won't feel right. It has to be like, what would a human being actually feel in that 14 years of their life? And I'm wondering if, to abbreviate the process a little bit, are there figures from history that we can pull from? Are there other figures from fiction that are really good examples of like a character picking up later, and that's how that felt like an organic track? Is there something we can look at in the real world? Like if we're looking at the backdrop of the political situation, which is the government that's been established for a while, that was this very not totalitarian, but very kind of like by the book regime is crumbling. The galaxy's in this 10-year shift of governments, and there's this resurgence of a grassroots movement to overthrow that. Like, what makes sense for these guys? And I think we kind of have to track it like pretty, not year by year, but maybe like every like 2-3 years in chunks. Like, what would be their life at that point? So like if the next thing they're going to do starting at the end of Serenity is presumably go off on another job, right? It's very much like, we're back to status quo. We're flying again. Let's go find our next job. How long does that last realistically? 3 years?
I can see
4 years?
For me, I can see Zoe maybe needing to go off on her own for a little while to grieve and kind of get herself together after Wash. But I see her coming back to Mal, because that's really all she knows, and that's what she loves. I see Jane maybe being there and sticking with him, just because, again, Jane is Jane, and Jane's not the brightest bulb. And he just seems kind of content with doing that. But I see Simon and Kaylee and River leaving eventually at some point, because at some point, you know, you're young, you're in love, you're in a relationship, you want a life together. You can't really build that on a ship. You know, eventually you want like maybe your own space, your own place of your own, and not feeling like you're just renting, you know, rooms from somebody else's ship. So I can feel that, I can see them leaving and like trying to settle down somewhere. So I think of like the crew that's left. I see those three leaving, and then I see Mal, Zoe, and Jane all still at least being on the ship, or still at least being like working together, even if it's not with Serenity.
I think you could go both ways for Zoe, because I could also realistically really see her like the next job that they pick up after Serenity, her just being traumatized and being like, this feels all wrong. This is all wrong. And then,
Without Wash here.
yeah. And then and also if she finds out she's pregnant, just being like, yeah. And leaving almost, I could see her leaving like almost immediately and just being like, I gotta just drop me off. Like I gotta be out of this.
I would agree with that, except for, again, that scene in the end of Serenity where it's at, you know, Wash dies and she goes immediately into Zoe old, you know, soldier mode, or like veteran soldier mode, where she's just focused on the fight, on the mission. And then like they ask like, what isn't Wash coming? She's like, he's not coming. And they all know what she means, but she just like doesn't want it. She's like focused on the mission. And then at the end, like in the, you know, the kind of the aftermath, when Mal asks her again, is asking about the ship, but it's really asking about Zoe. And he's like, you know, how's she holding up? Like, do you think she'll fly again? She's full of holes, you know, some are pretty bad, but like she'll fly true. Yeah. So to me, that's Zoe, because Zoe's a very stoic kind of person, and she's very, in a weird way, like outside of book, I would say she's almost like the most zen out of all of them, where because she sees things for what they are a lot and kind of accepts them, you know? So I think she'll grieve, but I don't see her going to pieces. Although it might change if we decide to do a pregnancy thing. If she found out she's pregnant, it might change, not because she can't handle it, but because she's like, Mal's too hot right now. He's gonna be chased by aliens. Like, I need to think about our child, you know, mine and Wash's child.
Let me throw something at you really quick. This is kind of like, you just made me think of something, not in relation to Zoe, but like in relation to the backdrop of the world. So, because I'm thinking about like real history, and like 14 years is like a long time. What I want to avoid is the feeling that whatever we say is happening when we pick up, people are like, that wouldn't have lasted 14 years. That would have been like 2 years, you know? And I think there's that tendency when you're thinking like this to not understand and fathom the actual amount of time that 14 years is. Like that's more than half of my life. You know, it's a long period of time. So I'm thinking, so young. Yeah, well, but it's a big chunk, you know. So so if I'm tracking, like, let's just say like 2010, it's like a decade, right? In our real world, 2010 to 2000, we're almost 2020, so like almost a decade. What's happened since that time? We kind of went from, and I'm thinking
the first year of Obama's administration
politically, yeah, that's what so I was thinking, like we kind of had, you know, you had, and if you even want to extend it back even further, you had like the George Bush presidency, which was marked by a lot of war, a lot of strife and conflict. The reaction to that politically was this massive wave of yes, we can, and 8 years of, you know, feeling like we're making a lot of progress. We have the first African American president, like this really, you know, and that might be tracks with the resurgence of the brown coat movement. But then what happened after that? Now the reaction to that was this massive wave of totalitarian nationalism that we're in right now. So maybe there's an interesting thing where if we were truly tracking what the political landscape of the galaxy looked like, there would have been an immediate brown wave resurgence. They would have had some success. They would have enjoyed years of like freedom and liberation. And the reaction to that would have been a resurgence of an alliance, but now not a George Bush alliance, now a Donald Trump alliance, which is trying to actively, is not hiding about its desire to wipe away people's liberties and being totalitarian.
And
that feels authentic.
You have people that are totally fine with that because the chaos and the aftermath of everything, like it was just too much for them. Like they don't particularly care about freedom, or, you know, they don't particularly care about freedom or independence. They just want the status quo to go back to normal because it's easier. It's just easier. And
Now that I think is an authentic picture of like what would have happened in the galaxy within an
Right.
actual 14-year span, because we've seen that in our own history.
but how does that relate then,
So then how does that,
specifically
right?
to the characters?
So perhaps a breaking point of, if we're treating it as the browncoats rose, had 5 or 6 years of prosperity, kind of in charge of the galaxy in some capacity, and then fell again. Perhaps that is where our characters fractured under this ideological shift. And that's where things split apart, because then that feels like, okay, they rode this on the parabola. For the viewers at home, they can't see I'm painting a parabola in the air with my finger. They rode this thing up, and it was at the tip top that they thought they were good, that things all of a sudden fell, and now they scattered as they fell down the other side of the slope, and now we find them on the downside in this awful version of this galaxy.
I feel like there's yes and no. I feel like in personal ways it'd be better and worse for them, because I like at the end of Serenity, where the operative tells Mal again, like, the Alliance is really fractured right now, but they're not. I imagine it's like Hydra at the end of Winter Soldier. Like they're fractured, but they're not gone, and they're definitely not going to like forget you did this. Like they will be coming after you. But I can't imagine that 13 years from Serenity, they're still going to have Mal as a focus. Like I feel like the heat is on him immediately. So I feel like in the next few years, it makes sense to me that Mal would still be hopping from place to place and smuggling and out there, kind of on the run. But I feel like at some point, like as the Reavers and the Browncoat threat grows greater, I feel like the Alliance would turn their attention away from him, and he would be able to maybe settle down somewhere, or
Yeah,
he
I
wouldn't
agree.
be on the run as much. Like I feel like that's how his arc would work, and maybe he's just to the point where he's like, I've lost too many friends. I've been on the run. Like, I still feel like maybe he settles down somewhere and he's like, I'm tapping out. Like, or he still has the serenity, maybe like Ryan said, but maybe it's, it's on, cinder blocks somewhere, just kind of hanging out. Cause he's like, you know what? I've spent, like me personally, like bringing like my own personal experience. Like I moved a lot in a short period of time when I was in my late 20s and through my 30s. I mean, I moved to a different country and back. I moved to different states and back, and it was great fun for a long time. But it was also really exhausting, and because I could never sit down like roots. And so here in LA, this is the longest I've been somewhere in the last few years. Like, and the thought of just like moving again, I'm just like, oh God, I don't want to move again, And I think no matter how much you love flying, like after a while, that chaos and that, like we're meant for stability. And I feel like Mal at some point would be like, I just want to be in one place and not constantly feel like I'm looking over my shoulder. So when he finally does get to that place where he doesn't have to look over his shoulder every 2 minutes for the Alliance chasing him, because their attention is, understandably taken up with like the Browncoats and the Reavers, I think he would settle down somewhere, or at least stay, maybe not settle, but at least stay in one place for a while, have like a base camp.
Yeah, I think a couple ideas are sort of starting to coalesce for me. All these threads that we're weaving. I think it's really interesting to me still, this idea that Mal intentionally pushed people away to kind of get them off the ship. So I think in those first few years after Serenity, it's gonna be probably pretty bad for them. I mean,
Yeah, they're not gonna be in a good spot.
anyone who knows anything knows what Mal was up to. No one's gonna be hiring him for those sort of jobs. I think it's very possible at a certain point he said like, all right, I'm kicking all of you off my ship.
And I can't afford you anymore. Like I can't support
to them,
you.
It would be a kind of a betrayal. Like how could you do this? To him, it's like this is the way to save you. And I think that could cause some tension and cause that cathartic moment later on in the series for them to be like, that wasn't your choice to make. It was this was our family too, and you didn't get to make that choice. But in the at least in the opening moments, like for that to have been the moment where everyone kind of went their separate ways. Zoe went to raise her son or her daughter, and Kaylee and Simon, go off and be professionals in some way. I think all of them kind of starting their lives, and Mal kind of going off on his own and settling down somewhere, I think makes some amount of sense. To a degree, at least, I think that he would need to have a reason to stay there, because I think very protective of people around him, but he's very rarely protective of himself. And I think there would have to be a really compelling reason why he decided to kind of stay in hiding instead of just going and being a big damn hero in his own way.
So I think I totally agree with that. And I think something that was set up in Serenity can help explain that. There's that scene where they get back to Shepard's, his land, their hideout, and like everybody's slaughtered. And Shepard Book's death really hit Mal hard. That's when he kind of went full, like, I don't give a crap what you think. Like, we're doing it this way, my way or the highway. If you don't like it, get off. Like, that's when he went full dick mode because he just couldn't deal with his death. And then you see that just devastating scene right after that where the operative has systematically been going through and just slaughtering any single safe spot, safe house, in base camp that they had. So, and then, Mr. Universe is killed. And so I think that I will always just look at it as the kid from Elf, which is weird. Or no, the Santa Claus, rather. Bernard the elf from Santa Claus.
Yeah.
But so I could see... And then with Wash dying, and I could see Mal going through this phase where he's almost, because he cares so much about the people around him, I could see him isolating himself on purpose and wanting to just stay in one spot because he's like, everywhere I go, death follows me. And if I keep traveling, I'll keep meeting more people. And the more people I meet, the more people that the Alliance can find to kill or interrogate or, come after me. So the best thing I can do for everybody around me is to just isolate myself as much as possible, settle down to like one town, like with few people or on my own, whatever. I feel like that, exactly what you're saying, like that might be the reason why maybe he does settle down and stays in one place, because he's like trying to kind of minimize the damage, because he feels like he basically is like the harbinger of death, because everybody that's been in his wake is dead now.
I like that a lot. And I think at the heart of hearts for Mal, that is probably the reason. I think to some extent it's a little dark for kind of a space cowboy fantasy show for that to be like the oblique sort of like stated reason. Let me pitch you something that I think kind of fits within the character of Mal in a sense, to make it a little bit lighter, but to still have that at the core of it.
Serenity was dark. Like I was surprised at how like I was like, oh dang, like
sure,
yeah. But I mean, think like we can lighten it.
Yeah, I don't think it's a dark universe. It's a kind of it has a real kind of tactile feel to it with consequences for actions. But I think to some extent, like they were never tortured heroes. Like they even the like Simon and his sister, like They had like really troubled past, but they got to be a part of the fun and part of the adventure and things like that, right? So let me pitch you something that I think kind of fits within Mal's character and could be kind of a unique twist. So I'm still really into this sort of fake marriage sort of thing. So I'm just going to play with that for a second. So all of the Firefly crew, why do I keep saying that? Serenity crew, after they went their separate ways, they all kind of come back together for this invitation that each got individually to attend Mal and Inara's wedding. And when they get there, there's like this backwater kind of like edge of the galaxy sort of classic kind of saloon town sort of environment. They all get there and they're asking around about Malcolm Reynolds. Where's Inara? Where's Malcolm? And everyone there is like, we have no idea what you're talking about. But if you're looking for someone, you should meet the mayor. And they go up to the mayor's house, and out comes to greet them, it's Mal. He's become the mayor of this town. And he hates it, but he's got this like responsibility. He feels like that he helped save this town. They made them the mayor, and he's been that since for the past 10 years or so. And to some extent, like he feel it's a good life. It's what he's always wanted, but he's also kind of like resentful of it a little bit. I would, and he's kind of looking for the first excuse to leave. And so when they get there, they meet Mal, and they're like, okay, where's Inara? And like, I have no idea what you're talking. I haven't seen Inara in 10 years. And then that's at that point, whatever is ambushing them, whatever orchestrated this event, we don't know what that is yet, but they basically blow up all their ships in this big fight. And all of them, like, they've gone and they've lived their civilian lives, but they kind of like snap back to it in an instant. They're gunslingers again. They fight their way out of it. And they're like, we got to get off this planet. Like, do you have a ship? And he's like, yeah, I have a ship. And it's the Serenity, like beat up, all dusty, like hasn't been used in 10 years. But that's sort of what brings them all together again, and they kind of click
And
back
I
into
could see
place.
Nara
as
being
the
like,
group
"What
is
did you do
starting
to my ship?" And he's like, "It's not your ship." Like there's that. Yeah.
I think that could be that to me is like a reason for Mal to kind of stay hidden. Like he's always had this sense of responsibility. Like if he feels like he's responsible for something, he sees it through. But also to some extent, like if he had any reason he could just leave, he probably would have, even if it meant like he's gonna get killed in some backroom brawl or get caught by the Alliance. But him to like feeling responsible for the citizens of this town, like that's what kind of kept him out of action for the past 10 years or so.
Can we use, and I kind of love this, but can we use his political positioning as a way to subtly explore the political landscape of the galaxy at that point? Like, can we use that as an opportunity to no exposition dumps, no like this is what's happened in the last 14 years, but that he's been elected a mayor and obviously he's in a somewhat like a position of leadership over a town. Can that be a avenue to sort of like start to fill in the details for that? Because as you guys were talking, I had this idea that if the brown coat movement was in resurgence and they would have had like this mini civil war, perhaps then there would have been like a sue for peace situation, and they kind of would have merged with what was the remnants of the Alliance and formed like a new government that was kind of like a halfway point, like somewhat restoring civil liberties. And maybe in that was where he found his way somehow to becoming the mayor of this town for some reason. And then it's where we pick up is when like this nationalist totalitarian movement is starting to take hold in the wider galaxy, and he's trying to keep his little town separate from that. Like, I know I'm getting like way too like big canvassy, but I just want to make sure that we're not just dropping them in a world and then we have to figure out these pieces later. Like the world that we're dropping them in feels authentic to a 15-year time gap.
Right.
So
Yeah.
can we? I think it makes sense, because that seems like if he's in a position of politics, no matter how small, that might be an opportunity to start to fill in little details about that.
My only thing is that Mal was never about politics, like the granular politics. He didn't give a shit about that. He cared about doing what was right. And so like
That's what I'm saying. He would have
like
left.
I don't see Mal being like political, I don't think politics for Mal is the way we see it now, where you have like the politician that's like canvassing and like campaigning and like involved in like policy and things like that. Like I think Mal is much more just like he's elected mayor not for his politics. He's elected mayor because he does what's right. Everybody likes him. Like it very much more like small town kind
It's
of
like
mayor.
a town of like 100 people. Or
Yeah,
something,
like
right?
small town mayor. Then like we're not. I think that can be in the background. I'm just a little bit hesitant to get like crazy into the politics and really tie it to like map it to like today, because like I get it. Politics, everything's fucked up right now. I get it, but I'm very tired of like shows like being very overt about their politics.
But it's not about that. It's the point is that we have to tread really carefully, because it's really, really easy to make a rookie writer mistake of treating a 15-year time period like it was 2 years. And we cannot fuck that up, because the whole thing goes to shit. Like it has to be a legitimate passage of time that feels authentic to a real world, and we're not just picking up where nothing happened and it was 2 years later.
I think that kind of situation, that sort of three-pronged war of the brown coat insurgency or whatever that ends up being, and the Alliance, the government, and then this Reaver threat, I think that provides a pretty big shakeup to the status quo. We haven't just returned to like Alliance bad, brown coat's good, Reaver's out there somewhere. Like I think it's shaken up quite a bit, and I think we can sort of explore the sort of nuances of that relationship, in this pilot, and as the series goes on, to sort of slowly explore, how those 10 years evolve.
Yeah, that's all
I can
saying.
absolutely see a situation in which, because there is open war with Reavers of all things, that large swaths of the population would prop up the Alliance again and be like, you're evil, but you're the only structure we
You're
have
not
to rely
cannibal
on.
evil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
you're
fine.
defending us, right?
I'm not
You
saying we
could
have
also
to-
have like something where, not every politician in the Alliance might be evil. There could have been people in the Alliance that were working against the Alliance, where you have maybe some of them, maybe the operative, maybe some of the people in the Alliance are working to kind of keep the Alliance's focus off of Mal,
Yeah.
because they realize that he did what they couldn't do from inside the system, which is he kind of blew the system up. But just because like like browncoats doesn't necessarily mean the people on the outskirts, like the pauper, hoi polloi, commoners on the outskirts. Like the browncoats or the rebellion uprising now could also be high class citizens and people that were formerly members of the alliance or in the alliance government, because now that they like the operative, who was a full zealot, fully believed what he was doing and what the alliance was doing, was a broken man at the end of Serenity. Like literally said like there's nothing left of me now, and like he turned away from the alliance, as zealous as he was, because he saw what they were doing was wrong, horrifically wrong. And so I imagine that the makeup of the brown coat kind of rebellion is a little bit different than what it was
Sure.
the first time, because now you have probably people that with more money, with more connections, that are actually inside the alliance working with them.
3 things real quick. One, totally agree. Not saying we have to explore all this in the pilot. Just want it to be in our minds so that we don't, so that we're making an authentic world. 2, love the idea of potentially catching up with, because this is our fan fiction, having the operative come back, like having them find him on a world somewhere in one of the later episodes of the series. I think that's awesome. It would be a really cool way to work him back into the series. And 3, could be very cool, as you were saying that, I thought of the idea of having some, because you mentioned there could be people in the alliance who aren't the evil, that people that we associate with the alliance. Perhaps one of them is one of the new characters we introduce as this person who was in the alliance, but it's the first person we've met that's like, no, like I actually thought they were trying to do something good, and like I was genuinely trying to do good, and somehow gets embroiled with them. Could be a fun new character to introduce.
Look at the doctor that Sarah Paulson played in Serenity, or the scientist, like the one that when she, they watched the horrific hologram of her basically saying, like, we were trying to do good and it all went horrible, and then we see her get eaten by reavers and it's awful and terrible, and like you can tell she's a good human being, and that's the thing. Like a lot of people in something that in a structure and organization that turn out to be evil aren't evil. They just don't know what the people at the top are doing.
Right. They devoted themselves to an ideal.
Yeah.
It could be really fun if someone was sent to Mal's planet as like a routine checkup or something. Just like, yeah, we're checking in from the main bureaucracy and just like making sure this town is going well, and then they get embroiled and whatever, and that's how we introduce that new character to the crew. Because I think there's an opportunity to introduce one, like if we're introducing the son Hobie, I think there's an opportunity to also introduce another character to fill another.
We've lost a few characters, so
that's what I'm saying.
more
We have
room there.
we kind of have 2 slots,
Yeah.
So it's like if you're introducing the son to replace Wash, you could introduce someone else to replace Book in a fun way.
Okay, so we have pretty much, I think we're all kind of set on the fact that it feels like maybe right that Mal has like settled. He's kind of taken responsibility for this town. That's where he is.
I love that so much.
Yeah, like I'm little star badge, Mayor Mal,
I love that
Sheriff
he
Mal. Yeah,
does it. He's doing it, but he hates it. That's the most Mal Firefly thing I can. That feels so Firefly that he's there, but he's like
just says something like really eloquent and responsible, and it's like, get me out of here.
Yeah, like he
Yeah.
takes him into the office. He's like, I don't know what I'm here doing.
oh, they're
here."
like we have paperwork for, and he's like, great, get right on that. And then they're like,
I
can
love
you,
that so
or
much.
he like, and they're like, did you get that? And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll get it. And he like throws their story. He's like, I haven't signed one of those in 5 years. Like he's like, but
So go ahead. So you're
so I was gonna say, so like I think we need to get a little bit more refocused, because it seems like we're going a little bit all over the place.
it's a tough beast to wrangle.
It is. But to try to get us back into that a little bit,
Yep.
I think we figured out like where Mal is, what he's doing, and
Yep.
why. Let's go down through the list with everybody else then. Where is Zoe and what is she doing?
Are you guys on board with the kid, Hobie?
Yeah.
I am,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So she's got a kid. If we say she gave birth roughly 8 to 9 months after the events of Serenity, that would make this kid probably 13 or 14. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So what her and her child are.
I think they're flying legit. I think they're both still flying. They're both still taking jobs, but they're not on the wrong side of the law anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
She wants to protect her kid. She'll do whatever she has to. But I also see her having taught him things like she knows how tough the world is. She knows that it's a world of chaos. She saw her husband get brutally murdered in front of her. So I also feel like I feel like Zoe, she's interesting. Does she go super protective like Tiger Mom? Or like, does she go like super protective? Or does she go the opposite route where she's like, because I could see her going both ways. I could see her getting really protective because she's seen all these horrible things happen and she wants to make sure it doesn't happen to her child. Or does she go a little bit the opposite and be like, I'm going to teach you how to fight. I'm going to teach you how to, because I think the trope that I hate is kind of the one that they use with Simon, where he was so overprotective of River. And you see it a lot where you have the one character that's so overprotective of another character and never wants them to get involved in anything. And it's like, well, it's just the world you're in. They're going to get involved in this eventually. Like, you can't keep them in a glass case. What I would like to see from Zoe is her then understanding that, not going with the kind of, tired storyline of being super overprotective, but I kind of like the idea of her where maybe it's not Mal who kind of treats him like an adult, but she almost does, where she like teaches her kid hand-to-hand combat. She teaches him how to like, or her, or little girl, maybe, well, I think probably little boy, teaches him to, here's like, he knew how to fix the ship when like there was an engine fire or something from like the time he was 5, because just in case she's not there anymore, like he needs to know how to survive. So I can see her raising him a little bit more with love, but like with a lot of like
I
adultness.
absolutely see like Zoe raising her son or her daughter like he was in boot camp. Like she's teaching him discipline, how to do things, how to get things done, how to, stay on course, how to be an upright citizen, all those sort of things. And then I think that'd be the really fun relationship to play with, as Julian brought up, when Mao comes into the picture and he's the, crazy uncle, and he's teaching him things like how to cheat, how to take shortcuts, like how to have some fun with things, how to leap before you look. And that's sort of the, not conflict, but kind of the two sides of the coin where, he's grown up very disciplined, he's very capable. But like, now he gets to have a little fun with his Uncle Mal.
Or like Simon bonds with him and he's like, Simon and Kaylee are like the aunt and uncle that like bond with him and like, yeah, we get it, kid, we understand. And like maybe that's Zoe's, like her struggle then is she has done so much to raise her son to keep him safe, but maybe it's difficult, like, and especially without Wash to soften her. That the like loving softness, like maybe that's always been a little bit of a struggle. And so her son is a little bit like, I love my mom and like, and I know that she loves me and she's doing everything right, but like sometimes I just wish she would just like be a mom and not a drill instructor, like be, just soft. And so maybe that's Zoe's struggles, that she sees her son finding these things that he's lacking that she hasn't been able to give him in other people. And like, that's her thing. Like, it's not so much a struggle of like, she's done all this stuff like soldier, wife, whatever. Now it's the struggle of how do I be the best mom possible, but then also still like understand that my entire life isn't about just being a mom. I'm also a soldier and a, pilot and involved in this wider world.
I really love the idea that this kid finds something to identify and connect with in each different one of our characters, like a new it's kind of a way to revisit all of our favorite characters through fresh eyes. And so like in Kaylee, he might find warmth that was lacking with his mother. In Simon, he might find someone who can identify with his feelings of being an outsider because he's, maybe a little prodigy. Too smart. In Mal, he would find someone that endorses, fun and lets him be a child. And in Jane, he might. I think there's something really fun. I don't know what it is.
I don't know if we let Jane around the kids.
I think there's something really fun in the Jane child relationship. Like if Jane became uber protective of the kid, I think that'd be kind of a fun arc for his character. But I don't know what that is yet. But I love this idea that this kid becomes a focal point that ties him to every other character and lets us like reconnect with those guys.
And River, he's just fascinated by him maybe because she's just so weird sometimes, like, and or River's like, I understand what it's like nobody understands me either, and he's like, and River's like, River's a little bit off sometimes. He's like, no, I really like her, like she totally understands me. And they have a weird connection where like she's off in her little river world and he's a kid, but they kind of have this weird like understanding. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I think it's just a really tangible reminder of why they're together, these invisible bonds that connect them. So like ultimately maybe some way through the series, if they were to lose the Serenity, it's a reminder that the ship itself, the physical space, wasn't what kept them a family. It was these bonds that kept them a family. I think it's a really great way to remind the audience in a really tangible way, like how they're all so connected.
Can I throw you guys something that I thought of like 20 minutes ago, but I forgot to say? I don't know how it works with what we've established is where Mal is now, but I think it'd be really fun. So if at the point where they started to go their separate ways, if Simon and Kaylee were like, we're going to go kind of settle down, we're ready, I think it would be a great moment of character growth for Simon to say like, okay, I'm going to let go of this overprotective babysitting feeling that I feel towards River. And I love the beginning, the seeds of the relationship that they planted at the end of Serenity with Mal and River. I think it'd be kind of fun if Simon and Kaylee, when they were ready to go off, said, you know what, like, Mal, I trust you. We've been through a lot together. Like, I don't need to babysit River anymore. She's coming a long way. She wants to stay here. Like, you guys go. I think that'd be an interesting partnership. It kind of reminds me of a 11 and I'm forgetting his name right now from Stranger Things. The
Sheriff. Yeah.
Sheriff
Hopper.
like a Hopper
Yeah.
11 relationship kind of. I think that'd be fun if that's how it went, because it also allows Simon to let go of that psycho baby. He's like, you know what, I gotta go live my life. You have to live your life. I can't be around to babysit you forever. But then it would be fun for her to be off with him. I don't know how you work that into the mayor thing, but it'd be funny if they arrived back in the thing and she's like his, not secretary, but like, assistant or something as mayor. And they just,
Simon comes back. She's like, I learned how to plant corn. Like
she's just like,
okay,
Simon, River, Mal, Simon. Like, there's that scene. I don't know. I like the idea that they would have stuck together, because I feel like that's where River would go.
Yeah, yes and no. I feel like River would be the one to let Simon go or force him out rather than Simon letting her go. But I feel like that would be a few years down the road, because we have to remember River is still, like, again, I mentioned this before, but she is still Bucky Barnes pre-de-brainwashing in Wakanda. She is lethal. She is dangerous. And there are still probably remnants of that, like, code, so like.
But again, guys, 15 years.
Again, but that's what I'm saying. If we're talking about their arcs, it's fun.
Somewhere
but like
in year 7, 8, they would have.
I get, yeah.
I'm not opposed to the idea of like River and Simon splitting up. I think it doesn't feel perfectly natural to me, but I think it could happen.
I don't see them staying split up for like years to the point where he doesn't know what she's doing.
Like, I think the only thing that would feel not a betrayal, but like I feel like as a fan, like would feel kind of like undercutting what I'd want to see, and maybe this is a bit too much fan service, but like to the extent that like River is a character that has so much potential, like power, like, and to see like her end arc of that it relegated to like a secretary or something would be kind of frustrating to me, to be like, no, I think she'd accomplish something. I think she'd be something or something.
Something I see maybe then that to me feels a little bit more authentic, because I see that maybe there's a point where Simon lets her go a little bit, but I do not see it being so. He's like, oh, I had no idea you were on this planet with Mal. Like, there is no way Simon's character would just let his sister go off and then just not keep in touch and have no clue what she's doing. Like, he might let her go, but there's no way he would let her just go and not have any clue what's happening in her life. What would be curious to me is if they leave, you have the Alliance, you have the Browncoats, and you have the Rebels, or the Alliance, the Browncoats, and the Reavers. But you also, again, have, like you said, you have these people like River that were being experimented on. So maybe that's Simon's goal and River's goal and Kaylee's goal, is that maybe they're like, we don't want to pick political sides at all. We just want to find these people that are like River, that were brainwashed and that were kids that were brainwashed and like experimented on, and just find them and help them. Like, maybe Simon, his job is he's trying to figure out how to like deprogram this stuff from them, or figuring out how to, like, maybe if they were experimenting with that solution or that chemical, maybe Simon puts his brilliant medical mind to figuring out a way to like create an antidote or a formula to keep them from going like full Reaver, or
Okay.
So maybe that's where they fit in, is that River, and that shows River's growth too. So if we want to like kind of focus on her character and kind of Simon and Kaylee together, River at the end of Serenity was like, you've always been saving me, now it's my turn to save you. And we see that River gets a little bit less of that like kind of little girl, and she is proactive instead of reactive. And maybe that's where River is very much like, they've been traveling for a couple of years or something, and maybe Simon and Kaylee have been kind of talking about like, we kind of want to leave and settle down, but like we're afraid to tell Mal. And maybe the impetus for that, or the catalyst, is that River comes to Simon. She's like, I think we should go. She's like, I really want, everybody's done something and I feel like I've done nothing. Like, I really want to find people like me. She's like, and help them, Simon. Like, we have to help them. And I can see Simon being like, yeah, this feels like the right thing to do.
Okay, I like this. So what about like River, Simon, Kaylee, Strike Force rescuing like traveling planets, systems, and like they've become like a really well-oiled machine. Like
they have like little medical shit maybe.
Yeah, like we catch up with them midway through one of the, like River's the operative going in. Simon's like very comfortable with her going in to rescue this person. He's on the comms.
Or maybe he's gotten tougher.
Yeah,
he's gone in. Yeah, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Maybe, I mean, because Simon, like we saw in Serenity, like he could shoot. Like Simon had to learn how to be a little bit protective. So maybe he goes in with
River, and Kaylee's on the comms, and she's like got the ship ready, and like we drop in on them in the middle of one of these things and see how well oiled they are, and they've been doing this for 5-6 years. And you're right, that's why they left. I like that. That's really cool.
Maybe that's another character we introduced. Then they've picked up maybe one of these characters, and that touches upon what Ryan was saying. Like he'd like to see what happened to some of Ryan or not Ryan, not Summer. Rivers. I
think that could be a really fun opportunity to do. I was just watching the CW kind of Arrowverse series. They did a crossover, or it was last year, so I'm behind. But it was the Crisis on Earth X, and the kind of opening part of the crossover is the wedding of Barry and Iris, and so you catch up with each character from the different shows mid fight or mid mission, and they're they're like, and by the way, did you RSVP for Iris and Barry's wedding? And he's like, well, I'm kind of busy fighting ninjas right now, like can we talk about this later? Like, so there's this humor of like it's their day-to-day,
the mundane, and the mundane all crazy.
So I kind of like that idea that we would drop in with them, and that's where they'd be like, oh,
honey, did we are we going to a little busy right now? She's like, I know, but like we just need to, like the RSVP says next Friday, or like by Friday, and like so
that could be really and you could have a moment where they say something.
What should we bring them?
And they say something cutesy, and you get a River eye roll, at Simon or something. And I think that could be fun. I'm really liking this idea. I think you're right. That's a better thing where they kind of went off and formed their own little unit. And the one thing I do want to say about River though is we're picking up like a really long time. Like I know I keep stressing the 15 years thing, but like I am not interested in her being this like completely autistic, can't even function as a social person anymore. I want her to be like pretty much like able to conduct normally and be like weird, but not like obtuse and completely. I don't think it's realistic that she would still be like that weird and unable to socialize with people. I think she's a pretty normal person, other than like she's still just a weird girl.
I also think though too, like giving her a purpose might help her focus a little bit.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, the thing that was triggering her was that code that the Alliance had hidden, that weird like anime style cartoon. As the Alliance breaks down and is involved with like, other priorities, that code probably dissipates. When she's not being, getting this like reprogramming all the time, she's probably going to have like struggles, but I would imagine over the years that starts to lessen. So like you said, like she is weird. She is still can be a killing machine, but she doesn't have that, the almost like fugue states where she doesn't know what she's doing, and all of a sudden she turns into like a mindless killing machine, and not having to isolate herself because of that. Like she does learn how to interact a little bit more easily with humans, and
have full conversations.
And I also see her being almost like finding her own path where she like this becomes her like driving force, like her belief. She knows what she went through, and she has such a good heart that she wants to find the rest of the students, like save them, or like or at least try to help them, because she's like, I'm only where I'm at because all of you loved me and helped me. And I had you, Simon, like the whole time. Because Simon's like, I don't know if we want to track these dangerous, crazy people down. She's like, Simon, if I hadn't had you, I might have been one of those, lost people. Like, but because of you and because of the crew, like I'm, she's like, I'm weird, but I'm okay. I can be around people. And she's like, well, don't we owe it to them to help? Like, not everybody had a Simon. And I can see Simon. I mean, he is a doctor. He is a helper. He's a healer through and through. I could see the medical aspect of it. Like maybe I can create a serum or a formula or, help them kind of get them back to normal and stable. And then, and Kaylee has a good heart too. And of course, loves Simon. And I can see her loving the idea of growing a little bit and kind of helping out with almost like a medical, or lab ship sort of, or, whatever.
What do you think? What do you think about this strike force?
It feels like the right direction to me, like to have that be the angle for River's motivation. This might still just be the fan in me talking. It just feels a little small to me. Just like I think the arc of River over the course of the series and the things we find out about her, she's like not like beyond brilliant would be like an understatement. Like her potential for anything she puts her mind to is like unlimited to say, she starts off as a genius and then has that unlocked even further by the experiments that the Alliance did to her. And so it just, to have her kind of blend back into the background and just be like one of the folks and like, a part of a trio and having missions and going planet to planet things, it just feels like, I don't know, in my mind, like after 15 years, like the things River could have accomplished are just like astronomical. And like,
what if she's the leader?
What if she started an academy?
You know what? I almost see her being almost like this might be interesting, and I don't know if it's something she would want or something that she would embrace. But I could almost see people like River almost becoming this like almost this like living saint to people because she's kind of an oracle. Like she sees things, she gets precognition, she she has what do they call it? The not the touch, the sight or whatever it is, the word they use for it. I could almost see her becoming almost like a saint to people or like a living like goddess sort of like to those that want hope or like kind of to the poor lost souls of like the universe. Like I could almost see her like when they land on a planet and people are like wanting to like just touch her and just be around her because I don't know. Like I almost does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think it's what you're kind of touching on. What I'm sort of feeling like. I think the direction that you're pitching, it feels like the more plausible one, like the more realistic one to portray. But like the direction in like my heart of hearts for River is much more interesting to me. That she hasn't been present for much of the last 15 years or so. That she's at a point in her progression where she had to go off and do things, and there are things that the other characters on the show can't understand, implicitly, because she has an agenda that she's trying to accomplish something. And the way she would accomplish it is not just to be like another Mal and just get a ship and go do things. Mm-hmm. Like her ability to create a system or create an environment where she can accomplish things is so far beyond those people. I think it's really interesting to me. And I think we risk a little bit like relegating her to a MacGuffin, but although she was kind of that in the original show, but to some extent, like having her be a little bit beyond the reach of the other characters in terms of her agenda, in terms of what she's trying to accomplish, and to have her kind of pushing forward the narrative from a broader sense rather than sort of the micro sense.
That could be an interesting thing, like an interesting thing with her relationship with Hobie too, because maybe River finds herself a little, she's better, she's in a better place. Mentally, she's a lot more stable, but she's also a little lonely because like, it doesn't matter. Simon is a genius, but Simon is a genius in normal genius ways. River is a genius in, I was as smart as Simon naturally, but then I was experimented on and now I can see the universe. Like she's I think it'd be interesting to play around with like how isolating that would feel when there's literally nobody around you whose brain operates at the level that yours does. Like how
what if
let me, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Let me just pitch you an alternate direction. I don't want to ditch this direction because it feels really strong. Like my higher brain functions are like that feels right. It's just my like lower fan brain functions that are like I don't know about that. But let me just pitch you something alternative, and we'll kind of just see where it falls. So I'm still in love with the idea that they all kind of reconvene for Mal's fake wedding. Like he's not actually marrying Anara, but they're all back together again. The only person missing from that bunch when they all arrive is River. And, Simon explains that like 5 years back or 10 years back or something, they had been going around together like as this like medical vessel, and they're helping treating people. And Simon's this great doctor and Kaylee's this great engineer. And they made a living going from planet to planet helping people. And all of a sudden they treated this one patient that, had something weird with them. And then the next day, River disappeared, and she just leaves like a voice message behind, being like, "I found what I needed to do. You can't follow me, but this is I found what my calling is, and it's better for you this way," or something like that. So they all back together, they're like having dinner or something like that, and then Mal's like, "So why are you guys here?" I'm like, "We're here for your wedding, you idiot! Like, what are you talking about?" I was like, "What wedding? I'm not getting like what? Like Anara got here yesterday. Like, what are you talking about wedding?" And then at that moment, River arrives and she's like, "I brought you guys together here because they're coming for Mal and he's gonna need you." I'm like,
"Oh,
who's coming for Mal?"
shoot.
And at that point, they all get attacked, and they whip back into their scoundrel mode. They all whip out guns again. They're right back into the moment of things, and it's then they escape on the Serenity, and we learn at some point going like progressively why River brought them back together.
Then could that tie into that idea of the Reaver intelligence guy? Like that's
I think
where you
River's the foil to that one.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I also kind of like there's some room there for like they whip right back into, but it's not. Let's be honest, it's like riding a bicycle again. But when you haven't ridden a bicycle in a while, you're a little bit more sore. So I think there's a lot of room to play with there, where he like one of them goes to do like a cool like kick spin move, like oh man, haven't done that one in a few years. Think I pulled something, or like something that's like
I think
they still have like muscle memory, but maybe they're not quite as sharp, and they're like, oh man, we got to get back in shape, or Jane like looks over at Mal like, yeah, been a while since you had to work out, huh, Mayor? And like he's like, yeah, I noticed you're not quite as fast either, Jane, or like something like that. So I think there's a lot of
with
fun
Jane
there.
Specifically,
and Zoe's still of course like super fit and like
with Jane specifically, I've been thinking of fun. If for some reason, just in my head canon, where he ended up is running his own crew, like because he always wanted to be captain. That was like a running thread, and he ceded it to Mal. I think his thing was just he went off and became his own captain and had his own crew for a while, and he actually was a pretty good leader, having picked up things from Mal. It would be really funny to have them back in the same room, and then when shit goes down, both him and Mal stand up at the same time and start barking orders, and then just kind of look at each other like, no, I mean you go, like it's fine, you go ahead. No, I mean, and they'll just like have that just as a funny moment. I love that though, because I think then that could be how we loop that Reaver,
and that would also be
leader in.
Like so just River's thing is like cool, everything's chill, and then River's just the wild card that like she's their little albatross, so to speak, but she's also like the chaos bringer.
Like, for a structure for the series, because it to some extent, like Firefly was sort of like very monster of the week, kind of like every episode was fairly standalone with some through line between it. If the kind of MacGuffin for the series is that every episode she's trying to rescue another one of these Alliance experimentees that have been scattered across the galaxy, and there's sort of this like shadow war going on between this River that's recruiting his own cabal of these super psychic warriors, and then River going around trying to collect as many as they can for this war that is going to happen.
I think you've cracked it.
Or maybe it's just River's just trying to save them. She doesn't want them on any side being used as pawns for anything.
From being recruited into this war.
Because you have the Alliance with them, the Reavers, and maybe even have the Browncoats they're trying to, and so she's like, I don't want them on any of these sides. I just want to save them, like, and I want them to be able to decide what they want to do.
I think with this kind of status quo, it's more interesting to me if the war hasn't started yet, but it's coming. So this conflict between the Browncoats, which as Alicia pointed out, probably at this point are not as pure as like an ideology as they were before. They're revolutionaries, but there's a lot of people in there who are opportunistic, who are kind of just in it for power, for gain on the outer planets. And this Alliance, which again has shades of gray in it, as Alicia pointed out, that not everyone in there is a bad person, but they're just struggling to keep a hold on a government of a galaxy, and that war is kind of going to be dwarfed by this coming Reaver invasion, and they need to work out their differences. So I think that is sort of like a frustration we can get to see as a viewer. It's like this doesn't matter. It matters a lot to them, but it really doesn't matter because when the Reavers come, they're not going to care who's a brown coat, who's an Alliance member.
Basically,
We're all dead. Yeah,
basically
we're all just-
a White Walker's
Right.
sort of threat in the face
Yeah,
of the
yeah, exactly.
Westerosi,
It's-
conflicts.
they are the White Walkers of space.
Yeah.
That's actually really good. Yeah.
So it's
I
like
think
Nega River, whoever, in Reaver space is recruiting for his coming invasion, and River at the same time is trying to, orchestrate a galaxy that can withstand this to some extent.
I think you've cracked it. And I think on a really small detail level, it's hilarious to me that River, being a weirdo, would have sent Inara an invitation to her own wedding.
Yeah.
That's such a River thing to have
Yeah.
done.
And Inara's just like,
She's there because she's like, I got an invitation to my own wedding that I'm not in.
Yeah.
So,
but like, I also love the fact that like, I can just, it would be kind of fun too. Like that would absolutely be a thing where like all of a sudden like River comes in and she's like, and it's like, oh, hey, River, no time to talk. You got to grab a gun. Like they're coming from out. Like and all of a sudden just like ships. And it's like River just brings chaos with her. And then they watch her in action and she is like, how's River been? Like, oh my God, you let her grow up on her own. Like she, how could you do that? And Simon's like, she's different now. And then they watch her in action and she just like, and they're like, okay, so she's good. Like she can handle herself.
I also think your setup of Mal being the mayor, but them not knowing he's like crafted a new identity.
Yes.
That's the perfect device. Because the thing I was thinking, like, okay, when they all arrive on this planet, how do they not just the first thing they do is like, why aren't you getting married? Or like, are you getting married? Like, how do they not bring up the marriage as the first thing of the wedding? And that would be the perfect, like when they encounter him, they're like, Mal, and he's like, no, I'm Joseph, Bainsworth. Like, what are you talking about? And then
It's like, get out of here.
and it takes like hours of the day for him to get to the point where they're finally having dinner quiet in a study. And then when his last like assistant leaves the room and shuts the door, they all look at him. They're like,
What the hell?
what is going on? Like that's the device that prevents them from like having
Sure.
to ask those
Yeah.
questions
And
right
I
up
love
front.
the idea of them just like being so glad to kind of see each other again. Like they didn't think they would be, but they're so
Yeah.
happy to see each other again. They're just having a great dinner, catching up, telling like the scenes in Firefly where they do this like 3 or 4 times, where they're just telling stories around the dinner table.
Yeah.
And then finally he's like, "Why are you here? Like what's going
Yeah.
on? Like what is this?"
And he's like, and they're like, oh, like, we're getting married. He's like, are we getting married, honey? And Nara's like, don't push, or like something like that. So yeah.
I think that's really fun. Okay, I think we've
and
cracked.
like when there's like, well, then who did you guys get an invitation from? I got an invitation for your wedding. Like, or how did you? Only thing about it would be very River to send Inara an invitation to her own wedding. I don't know if it would be very Inara to like accept that invitation.
Well, she wouldn't
might be-
accept. She would just be like, "Why am I?" She would be curious and be like, "What
true.
the hell's going on?
We
need
haven't
to
really.
go."
Okay, so out of all the characters, we haven't really talked about her. Where is she? What's she done? I think she's the toughest one because she was always kind of the most mysterious of the.
Well, here's the big question: do we think she goes back to being a
Courtesan?
companion
yeah.
or not? I don't think so, but that's
I feel like Anara's another one that I feel like we do disservice to her if she just went back to being just a companion. I feel like she had a lot more potential to her than just being a companion. But in kind of geisha culture, they had a lot of power back then, and they could marry powerful men. But even that kind of feels like a little bit cheap that but maybe it's that maybe she's already been married. Maybe she has married and settled down with a man that is not quite what she wants. He's not quite Mal, but he's stable and he's, whatever. And she finds that or maybe she's using him to get power or to get, intrigue, to get intel on the Alliance.
more. So, how did you guys pop the question, or like, why are you getting married? Well, I'm already married. You guys already got married? We missed the wedding? No, what wedding? What are you talking about? Well, she just said she's married. Aren't you married? Yeah, I'm married. So did we miss the wedding? No, like that whole conversation. If she's
Yeah.
already married, I think is hilarious between all the characters.
But I mean, maybe we don't have her married off at all. Maybe she decides that like she's just gonna like Mal's the dude for her, but she also knows that they're never gonna work. So maybe she just stays single and she goes off and she opens her own academy or she
Yeah, I was
starts her
thinking
own
that's-
school or something.
That seems like an angle.
Let me throw a giant curveball that 99% will not work.
Okay.
But I'm
Do
just
it.
intrigued by
Do
it.
it, you coward.
What if Inara joined the Alliance and she is a high-level diplomat or a high-level something or other
She's
in the Alliance?
what's her name from Solo?
Kira?
Kira.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorta.
Yeah.
Sorta. Yeah, sorta.
But like to some extent, I think her arc in the series was finding that, like, I think she liked being a companion because it let her take care of people on like a personal level and get to know people and add goodness to their life, right? And during these years of chaos, like maybe she found the best way to do that was to become a part of the system and to do good as part of the government, as like a diplomat or as like an envoy or as like a politician or to some extent. And that could be an interesting point of conflict later in the series for Mal to find out she works for the Alliance now and to